Okay, thank you very much. Any other blue cards? All right, next up is agenda item 3, message from the president and board members. Got anything on this side?
Nope.
Anything over there? Well, I've got a few comments. I haven't really given comments in a long time, so I'm kind of going to catch up a little bit. This is kind of a little long. If you take a little nap, it's okay. Just maybe your partner can nudge you when it's over. So I'm going to just talk about Subsidence District a little bit and a few other things, and then talk about the CIP at the end. Again, it's a little bit long. Thank you for your patience. Last week, the North Harris County Regional Water Authority presented the Subsidence District with clear, documented reasons for our setbacks, resulting in being 5 years behind schedule due to COVID shutdowns, supply chain collapse, multi-year easement delays, and the City of Houston's Northeast plant expansion issues. These weren't excuses, these were regional realities. Yet the Subsidence District did not acknowledge any of it in their discussions at the end of their meeting and after the meeting. They immediately fell back on buy education credits as if that fixes a 5-year construction deficit. That tells me they're not operating in the real world. They're operating in a regulatory bubble that no longer matches actual conditions. They're simply interested in checking a regulatory box, whether or not that box makes sense anymore. Let's be honest, this conversion schedule is not about conversion anymore. It's about funding future growth. I've heard the former mayor say it too. The surface water mandates, conversion deadlines, and penalties were never designed for affordability. They were designed to push massive regional growth onto the backs of current ratepayers. We're watching homeowners struggle with high taxes, costly insurance, inflation, utilities, and the Subsidence District's answer is buy more credits, pay more fees, absorb more debt. Well, ratepayers cannot carry unlimited infrastructure costs because other jurisdictions want to accelerate growth or maintain a rigid schedule that no longer reflects post-COVID reality. Let's remember something fundamental. Harris-Galveston Subsidence District is an unfunded mandate. They issue the regulations, they enforce the deadlines, they impose the penalties, but they do not provide the money, resources, or manpower to meet the mandates they impose. They push the cost and the debt downstream onto water authorities, MUDs, and ultimately onto the homeowners who can least afford it. Even AWBD, the statewide organization representing these very special district water utilities, explicitly criticizes restrictive, unfunded state mandates. That is exactly what the Subsidence District is imposing on us. Unfunded mandates are the fastest way to bankrupt ratepayers while making regulators look clean. The Subsidence District gets to say it's your responsibility while writing a rule book with no financial support behind it. That is not responsible governance. That's cost shifting, and it hurts homeowners. And here's what makes the Subsidence District's rigidity even harder to justify. The state itself, the Texas Water Development Board, has already demonstrated far greater flexibility. On July 24th, 2025, TWDB approved the City of Houston's request for $966 million in financing for the East Water Purification Plant expansion, with the total project costing $4.2 billion. As part of that approval, TWDB granted the City of Houston a water loss mitigation waiver. Even though the city was above the threshold for real loss, staff explicitly called it a water loss waiver, and board members acknowledged it on the record. According to TWDB policy, utilities can request and receive waivers from the requirement to dedicate funding to water loss mitigation if they're showing progress and a plan. TWDB's own dashboard shows these waivers have been granted in multiple cases. It's an established form of regulatory relief. And here's the part that deserves emphasis. For months, the Texas Water Development Board operated with only 2 full-time paid appointees, a board missing 1/3 of its legally required membership. Yet this understaffed 2-member panel continued rubber stamping billions of dollars in financing, waivers, and approvals with virtually no resistance. Even in that diminished state, the state still found a way to provide flexibility and relief. So if the state can grant a waiver to the city, a system with massive documented water loss issues, then HGSD has no basis to deny reasonable relief to an authority like ours that does not have a water loss problem. HGSD is holding us to a stricter, harsher standard than the state holds the city of Houston. And here's the part that should bother every taxpayer. HGSD's 19-member board is appointed, not elected. 19 people who nobody elected are issuing mandates, deadlines, and penalties that directly affect the bills of hundreds of thousands of households. How is that acceptable? How is it that an appointed board has more authority over our ratepayers' bills than the board those very ratepayers actually elected? That is upside down governance. Ratepayers have zero voice in the Subsidence District's decisions, yet they're expected to foot the bill for every consequence of those decisions. There's something fundamentally wrong when an unelected board can dictate debt and costs to elected officials who actually represent the public. Meanwhile, this same Subsidence District Board never questions approving new wells. Every month, they rubber stamp wells with no debate, no analysis, no long-term thinking. They follow the GM's recommendations blindly, even when the wells undermine the very conservation policy they claim to be protecting. If conservation were the priority, they'd scrutinize new wells with the same intensity they scrutinize conversion extensions. But they don't, and that contradiction speaks volumes. And we also need to be honest about the subsidence argument, because that is the foundation the Subsidence District uses for everything. We are being asked, and ratepayers are being asked, to shoulder nearly $10 billion in cumulative infrastructure costs to mitigate what in many areas amounts to a few inches of subsidence over decades. The Subsidence District presents subsidence as an imminent crisis, but the actual measured data in many parts of our region does not match the scale of the financial burden they are imposing. If subsidence is truly the driving concern, then why does the Subsidence District Board rubber stamp new well permits every single month without scrutiny? How can subsidence be both the justification for strict mandates on us and yet not be a concern when new wells are being approved by the Subsidence District itself? That inconsistency undermines their own narrative. And the growth we're dealing with isn't just rooftops, it's heavy industrial users. Texas is exploding with new industrial facilities, data centers, hydrogen plants, biotech, and advanced manufacturing. They're all coming to Texas. These facilities can use millions of gallons per day, far more than residential neighborhoods. Yet the Subsidence District acts as if residential conversion is the only thing that matters. They ignore industrial demand, even as that demand skyrockets. They're pretending the system is the same as it was 20 years ago, and it isn't. And ratepayers should not be subsidizing massive water infrastructure so private industrial users can absorb it cheaply. At the end of the day, the people paying the bills cannot keep absorbing financial burdens created by mandates and moving goalposts. Unreasonable deadlines don't build pipelines. They only build penalties and debt. We cannot reverse COVID. We cannot undo supply chain collapse. We cannot rewrite agency delays. But we can demand that the Subsidence District behave like a partner instead of an enforcer. Buying credits is not a construction strategy. It's a financial punishment disguised as compliance. I'm getting almost done here. Our responsibility, and my responsibility, is to protect the people who pay the bills. That means challenging unfunded mandates, rejecting unrealistic deadlines, exposing the contradiction of rubber-stamped wells, acknowledging industrial growth's real water demands, refusing to let an appointed board impose debt on elected boards and their ratepayers, and ensuring ratepayers aren't forced to shoulder costs they did not create. We are here to protect the people who elected us, not to cater to the Subsidence District. And lastly, as we transition into tonight's presentation of the 5-year capital improvement plan, I want to be very clear. I'm looking for a CIP that actually makes sense financially, operationally, and legally. I'm looking for a CIP that reflects reality, not an outdated set of assumptions. A CIP that the ratepayers can afford, not one that buries them under long-term debt driven by mandates that were never funded. I also want to address the 2014 groundwater reduction plan. The plan the Subsidence District approved and the plan we have been working under for more than a decade. Whether that plan anticipated today's growth isn't the issue. The problem is that the target has never stopped moving. Every time groundwater demand increases from new subdivisions, commercial corridors, or large industrial users, the conversion percentage shifts. We are being held accountable for groundwater usage we do not authorize, do not regulate, and do not control. So as we review the 5-year CIP tonight, my focus is simple. Does it reflect the job we're actually created to do? Is it consistent with the 2014 plan we were told to follow? And most importantly, is it affordable for the people who pay the bills? Thank you for listening to me for that long little speech there. If the board doesn't have anything else, Director Ramsey.
Yeah, if there's no objection, I'd like to have that included verbatim in the minutes.
Gotcha.
I agree. Very, very well done.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? If not, again, like I said, I haven't spoken in a long time, so I kind of was, it all built up.